So the goal here really isn't to jump off of something high. The goal is to jump off of something low. The goal is to get the highest multiple that you can with the least amount of effort.
Don't be dollar dumb with this stuff, right? Spend the money for the best advice you can.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Hi, welcome to The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. In this episode, I'm joined by my co-host, Rich Wood. Rich is the coaching director for Maui Mastermind. He's been an entrepreneur, a business executive, a business coach now for close to 30 years. He's fantastic. I've had the opportunity and the good fortune of working with him with many clients, hundreds of different clients together. Now, in this episode, Rich and I are going to dive deep into how do you maximize the sale of your company? How can you strategically structure a sale so you get top dollar for it? The conversation was going so well that we had to break it just because Rich and I had only scheduled a certain amount of time, and he was good enough to schedule another time at the end. So we've broken this episode into part 1 and part 2 that will be released 1 week apart from each other. So if you like what you hear in this episode, which I know that you will, you'll get concrete ideas about how you can increase the effective sale price of your company. Make sure you check out part 2. This will be more about strategy for part 1. And in part 2, we'll get into things about what are some of the deal points and contractual pieces and games that buyers play, and how do you protect yourself in part 2. All right, let's jump into the episode. Well, Rich, welcome back to The Business Coach. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy these interactions we have.
Yeah, it's always fun. Here, hey, I'm curious here, have you jumped out of an airplane recently? I know for those that don't know, Rich is someone who flies planes. He's a pilot. And for some reason, I thought it was very funny. He's not very confident in his piloting skills because he's also done like hundreds of parachute jumps. How many parachute jumps have you done?
I've got about 700 jumps, and I've got, so the other layer, I'm very confident as a pilot. I am a commercial pilot, so I'm very confident as a pilot. I'm also very confident as a skydiver. And the other thing I don't know that you know about me is I bungee jump. So I'm a bungee jumper as well. So,
man, Rich, we have so much in common and so little in common. I'm so much on the business front. Those that don't know, Rich is we're good friends, and we talk about clients all the time and businesses that we coach and how we've done this for years. But one of the things that those that are watching here, I tend to be a fairly physically conservative person. I love being active. I love hiking and all that. Rich, I know you're an active guy. You like to get on your bike.
right.
I knew that you did jumps. I was teasing about the piloting, like why is a pilot, if they're any good, need to know how to jump out of the plane? But I didn't know about the bungee jumping. What's the highest thing you've ever bungee jumped off of?
Well, so the goal here really isn't to jump off of something high. The goal is to jump off of something low.
Tell me that.
The thrill comes in how close you get to the ground before
yeah, okay.
Right.
Okay.
You can, if you jump off of something that's 1,000 feet tall, takes you an awful long time to get to the bottom. Whereas if you jump off of something 200 or 300 feet off the ground, that's a bigger rush. So I'm not one of those guys that goes out and just jumps and does stuff like this. I'm very methodical and very practical and very safe, conscious about the things that I do. So I'm not, I like risk, but I'm not stupid.
That is hilarious. Okay. I get it. Now I can absolutely see you calculating the cord's going to extend this much. My margin of safety is that much. I can see it. Let's talk, Rich, about a different kind of taking a jump out of the plane or a jump off the bridge, which is the exit from a company.
Right.
So in this episode of The Business Coach, we're going to talk about some of the insights we've seen and learned, not just from companies that we might have sold, but, I look at for the exits that I've had, I've learned a lot, but I've learned even more from working with dozens and dozens of clients that have sold companies. And what I'll do is I'll get an email like this one that came in, and the email will have with it the offer. And then later on, I'll see a contract for the purchase and sales agreement for a buy-sell on a purchase of a company. And, the client will oftentimes ask for input. I qualify, hey, I'm giving you my input as a business owner.
Right.
I think I've got a lot that I can offer you, but, you're going to check with your own attorney and CPA, blah, blah, blah. But outside of that, today we're going to talk about what we've noticed, observed, and learned about a successful exit from ourselves, our experiences, and from the clients that we've had the opportunity to work with.
Right. So from my perspective, some of the things that I've seen as challenges with business owners is they're reactive to offers that they might get to sell their business. And that doesn't usually end up in the highest markup that they'll get for their business, the multiple that they'll get for their business. So typically what, I encourage business owners to do, if they're contemplating a sale at some point in the future, look forward to the end point of that sale and build the story for what you want the business to look like a year from now or 2 years from now when you go to put it out on the market. So be strategic and proactive to that process, not reactive to the process.
And let's talk about this idea of the process that's used to sell. Like if I look at the most common reason why companies get sold, it's some kind of personal calamity or tragedy, right? An owner gets hurt or dies, or someone in their family that pulls them away. And so that's what we call the distress sale. The
Right.
second most common would be what I call the unsolicited offer that comes in, and I now negotiate with that one person for the purchase of my company. The best process that will yield the best money is a competitive sales process where I have my investment advisor. If I'm a 10, 20, 30, $50 million company or larger, it's going to be an investment banker. If I'm somewhere between probably 1 or 2 million on the low end and 10, 15, 20 million on the upper end, it's going to be a sell-side advisor. They have different names for them. If it's under a couple $1 million, it's probably going to be a business broker who helps me sell. And can I get them to get me a competitive process where they get as many different interested parties that are competing to purchase the business at the same time early on with that part? Yeah, I guess there's one more, Rich, the retirement offer. I never really thought about that, but like I've got a very dear friend of mine who built this company. He retired, didn't even think about selling it. He literally just closed the doors. And I was like, I can't believe you just did that. If you had just told me before you shuttered it all, before you told all your customers that you were leaving and retiring, before you just turned off the lights, we could have at least gotten you several $100,000, if not $1 million, for
Right.
the asset that you spent 30 some odd years building. Comment from you.
Yeah, the comment I would make is that there's a series of sales of sell side that you would get involved in that can be moved to a strategic place. Whether somebody approaches you to buy the business, you can turn that into a competitive environment. Whether you're proactively thinking about selling it at some point in the future, that definitely is something you can be proactive to the sell side. But the one that sticks out as being something that makes it very difficult, I think, for business owners to maximize the dollars is that situation where there's a death or a loss or something that's a forcing function to just offload the business quickly. And in those kinds of situations, I think that the number of things that you can do to improve your business, there are still a number of things you can do to improve the sell number of the business, the price of the business, but your options become somewhat more limited if you're in that latter situation. So aside from that, though, any of those other situations you described, I think are situations that you can turn into a bidding process to maximize the price that you get for your company.
Yeah. And your comment about the emergency sale, I mean, the best thing we can do there is not to make the business more saleable from at the point the emergency happens forward. What did we do to build strategic depth in the business earlier on that we made the business less reliant
Right.
or independent? But coming back into this idea of strategic, let's stay there for a moment. I look at my clients that have had the most success selling companies. And generally speaking, there are going to be 3 different types of, there's more than 3 buyers or categories of buyers, but the 3 most common are what I'll call strategic buyer, financial buyer, and replacement buyer. So a replacement buyer would be, if I have a small, mid-size, right, small, middle stage level 2 company, I might be doing anywhere from 200,000-300,000 in revenue to maybe 2 or 3 million in revenue. But it really revolves on the owner. The person who buys it is going to basically take you out of the center of the business, plug themselves in, and basically jump in owning the business. A replacement buyer is limited because they don't have the funds to pay you. So they're limited to paying, generally speaking, couple 100,000 to maybe $500,000. I've seen them go as high as maybe 1.5 million. But even that, they need the owner to finance part of the sale because they don't have options to finance the purchase. Financial buyer, someone who says, hey, this is a good cash business. I want to buy it from you, but I either want the people who are in the business to stay running it, and I just want my return, or I expect you to stay in it. I'll buy a portion of the business. I just want my money out of it, and I want you to keep running it. One of the two ways. Strategic buyer is someone who wants your business for its revenue, for its profit, but also because there's something valuable beyond just the direct profit. This could be a private equity company that says, your profit that I can buy at a 7x multiple, when I bring it into my other business, now it's instantly worth 15x or 20x multiple because we have a much larger scale. Or your customer list is so good that you sell only widgets, but I'm going to sell gizmos and whammies to your list, and I can triple, quadruple, 10x my sales by selling our stuff into your customer list or some other reason.
Right. So I was just going to say that the strategic buyer is the one that you're going to get the highest multiple on, and then it decreases as you go down the list of buyer types that you just described, right? So I think that it's important to if you can be proactive to the process, then you can set yourself up to position yourself to find those strategic buyers that are going to give you the highest multiple. And I think that the other thing that people should know is that you're not selling a business based on the price of the business, right? You're selling the business based on a multiple of your EBITDA, right? So it's typical a multiple of either the revenue or the EBITDA that you're going to sell that business for. So the goal is to get the highest multiple that you can with the least amount of effort.
You know, it's interesting. It used to be the case that when you thought about strategic buyers, the best strategic buyers tended to be competitors or suppliers or vendors of yours that have known you for 2, 3+ years and saw something about what you did that they could take and use in their business. This is the company, like one of our clients that sells airline parts or companies. And he recognizes that he might add a repair component to what he does, buying a competitor that does the repair side. It's a tangential or adjacent business to what he does. He creates business with it. But what's interesting, Rich, is I look at how many of our clients have now recently, in the last 10-ish years, have a brand new source of strategic buyers, which are all these private equity companies that are out there. There's a proliferation. I mean, the amount of money in private equity in the last 20 years has just shot up well over 1,000% growth in that terms of just raw dollars to invest. And a private equity company can be a strategic buyer. Talk about how can a private equity company potentially be a strategic buyer of my business?
So a private equity company could be a strategic buyer because they're looking at you for the assets you've got. They're looking at you for the market penetration that you have. They're looking at you for the IP that you might own, because they can take that IP, those assets, the demographics, the markets that you're in, and they can up leverage those to markets that they have access to. So oftentimes private equity companies will take piece one and couple it with piece two and couple it with piece three that combined become a 5x for what the overall revenue looks like. So typically private equity companies are thinking much more strategically about how they can leverage the assets, the IP, the demographics to increase as a multiple based on their access to markets.
You know, it's interesting. We have a client I know jointly here who runs a surgery practice specifically in vascular surgery. And I remember having a conversation with him this past summer. And as we were talking about this, there's a particular type of procedure that he's gotten really good at teaching other people on and how to set that up as a practice within a practice. So this other private equity-based medical group that has over 200 offices would be able to put this procedure into 200 different locations. Each of these locations would generate probably between 1 to 2 million or more in revenue per month from this add-on, which all they would have to do is invest in the provider time. They'd have a little bit of staffing, but they would repurpose some of their space within their existing facilities. It's a $200-300 million business opportunity. No wonder this private equity company wanted to buy that from him. They wanted to buy out his practice and bring him in. Now, he was smart. He decided that he didn't want to sell necessarily, but that he would strategically partner for a share of the revenue. By the way, if I can share for revenue versus profit, you can mess with profit easily. Top line revenue is a lot harder to screw with, isn't it?
It is, indeed. But the interesting thing is so we get back to this concept of as you build your business, you want to be thinking strategically. If you're going to sell it at some point, I think everybody has this in their mindset that they'd like to create a business and sell it for a multiple of what they for a multiple of what they've got into it. But if you systematize the business and you create a processes and procedures that are systematized, a private equity company can come in and take that out of your business and duplicate it across their business to increase efficiencies, which has a multiple effect on growing their own profits. The other thing that I see a lot of private equity companies do is they're coming in and they're looking at a business model. In one of the other podcasts that we talked about, if you have a cookie cutter simplified business model that repeats over and over and over again, I can take this same business model and as a private equity group, duplicate it in different parts of the country, and I can make money hand over fist by duplicating a relatively straightforward, simple business model. That's huge upside for a private equity company.
And they can do it faster. I mean, like this particular surgeon, he had scaled up to 5 locations, but for him to open a location, it's millions of dollars of build out. I got to hire all the staff. And if he does it, it's going to take him years, decades to do the same scope he could get in 3 to 5 years with the other. And who knows what's going to change for the opportunity. A new technology comes out. The surgery is not the same way. I love that. Let's jump over here to deal points and contracts when we're selling a company. Now, when we structure a sale of our company, everyone's going to want the holy grail is to be able to do a stock sale to do where I'm selling out my shares of my stock or I'm selling my membership interest in an LLC. If I'm doing that, I generally get long-term capital gains treatment on my sale. But most times, no one's going to want to buy your company that way because they inherit all your liability at the same time because they're buying your entity that's doing the business. Usually they're going to want an asset sale, which means you keep the entity, you keep all the liability. We're going to buy every asset, all the IP, all the inventory, all the contracts with employees. We're going to buy all that into a new entity that starts clean and fresh. But a lot of that from a tax standpoint is going to get taxed at ordinary income. Not all of it, but a lot of it is. But let's talk about a deal point. Rich, can you describe what an earnout is? And let's talk about that because I see so many of our clients get this wrong when they initially come to us about it. Hey, I've got it. I can sell my company for, let's make it easy number, $10 million. How might an earnout factor into how that money's being paid, Rich?
So an earnout will give you certain dollars associated with the targets that you set in an earnout. And they could be revenue targets or they could be profit targets. So if you're buying a business and you're setting it up with earnouts, the person selling the business has to reach certain target limits in order to get higher percentages of what that purchase price was. And if they don't reach those performance targets that you set up in appended earnout targets to, then it decreases the overall sale value. So I think setting up earnout targets in a way to structure a deal is a great way to go if you're the buyer, because that gives you a lot more leverage in making sure that the seller is true to his word about what the business is worth.
Yeah, it's interesting. So from when I look at the times I've bought an asset, like a business, the earnout side of it, if I'm not going to be able to owe the money to some of the money of the purchase price to the person selling it, then I'm going to be much stronger in my negotiation to get a lower price because I'm taking on more risk. If I'm buying a business for, again, we'll use 10 million just because it's a round number. For those people watching or listening, this could be 150 million. This could be 2 million. Same concepts apply. But if I'm buying it for 10 million, if I can owe the seller, say, for example, $3 million over the course of 24 or 36 months after the purchase, I can put in there certain warranties, which are legal things, that a legal way of saying these are promises that the seller has made to me when I'm buying for a company. And if they aren't true, I can put some teeth in that reduces down my purchase price, which is a way for me to control risk. Plus, it gives less cash I need up front with that. Go ahead, Rich.
Well, I was just going to say that what you're describing is a fairly complex sell side approach that not everybody's going to want to, it's not everybody's going to know about. So one of the things that comes to mind is as you proactively go down the path of thinking about selling your company, one of the things that I advise everybody to do is make sure you put together a team of people that know what they're doing. So you need a tax, a strategy person. You need a lawyer that understands M&A. You need a lawyer that understands the deal side of your business structure. That's going to be something that's key to you maximizing whether you're buying a company or selling a company. That's going to be really important on both sides to make sure that you have the right team of people that understand this. So I would encourage people, don't go down the path of trying to sell your business or buy a business without having somebody on your side that,
Yeah.
or
It's budgeted in there, right, Rich? I see people all the time that say, oh, it's too expensive. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes, you should budget in. If I'm selling a $10 million company, I'm going to be spending probably anywhere from a low of 20,000 to maybe as much as 50,000 on my legal and tax consulting on that sale, depending how complicated over the lifetime of it. And chances are I should also be willing to pay that sell side advisor that they bring real value for that. Usually they should be able to get me one extra multiple on the sale.
exactly.
They do.
They earn what you buy them for.
Yeah. And you said something, an M&A attorney, you're using an acronym. So I'm going to pretend I'm a seventh grader. What does M&A stand for?
So mergers and acquisitions. So it's an attorney that understands the concepts of buying and selling a business.
That's right. So I don't want to go back to my normal business attorney. He might have only represented a dozen companies on the sale. I want to go to somebody that this year has helped 100 businesses be purchased or sold. 100's probably too many for one attorney.
Right.
25 this year be purchased or sold. And I want them to have done this for 10 plus years. That's who I want to represent me, especially important if it's a large asset. Most of the clients that we have that sell companies, they tend to go in about the 10 to $100 million range of the sale price is what commonly our clients are selling for. Don't be dollar dumb with this stuff, right? Spend the money for the best advice you can.
Absolutely. And find one that's in the market sector that your business falls into. So if you're selling an aerospace and defense company, find an M&A lawyer that's experienced, years of experience in your specific sector of the business. If it's commercial software, same thing. If it's in automotive or if it's in the medical practice industry, find an M&A lawyer that has a dozen years of experience at least in your sector.
Right, because they're going to know what the deal point should be. You might not even know, for example, if you're selling a software platform company, that you should get some home run warrants for a particular growth pattern that happens post-sale. It might not even occur to you, but your attorney says, well, having sold 35 of these in the last 10 years of this type of company, what I've seen is a dozen of them added this in there and it made them an extra X million dollars. You should ask for this. So the right person is going to know the deal points. And that's an important comment there and industry specific. I love that, Rich.
One thing that I want to just throw in here is that if you're thinking about selling a business, be strategic about it. I mean, when I say be strategic about it, look at where your market sector is headed in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, right? Because there might be things going on. I mentioned aerospace and defense. So there might be things going on in the defense industry that is on the upswing. And if you position yourself right, you know that the market's going to hit in 3 years. So you want to position for sell side in 3 years. Whereas if you're in a market sector that is on the downslide, and sometimes we see the health side of the business, health practices business on the downside because of what's going on in the nation and all of that. So there's better times to sell and there's better times to wait, but be proactive about it based on what's going on in the world around us.
I love it. There's so much in this area, Rich. I think we're going to break this into 2 episodes, just even talking through here. So let's stay with this strategic side. We're going to make in part 2 of this. I can already say I want to get into some of the contractual, some of the more concrete deal points to the letter of intents through the purchase and sales agreements. We'll set that aside to the next episode. Let's stay with this for a moment here. You said something I think was really important. You were talking about here that I want to prepare for my sale up front. I see that one of the best things that I should be investing in early in the process is really great financials. I look at what happens when I try to sell a company and my financials are such that I have to go and try to explain line items or expenses that are hidden within there. Oh, well, actually, out of the 10 million revenue, we had 3 million, 4 million of G&A expenses. Of that, really 250,000 was really owner discretionary expenses. I paid for my car in there. I paid for my family vacations I made into a meeting expense, and I paid for these things in there. My wife and my kids were on the payroll. And what happens, they go to sell and the buyer's like, well, first of all, that makes me uncomfortable with what other things might be done strangely in financials. Number two, I as a buyer, I'm going to negotiate very hard against that. Well, if that really is what your financials are saying, that's not what I see here. I have to go with what you've said in your financials. I'm not going to give it easily to you. I'm going to make that a concession to give you back some of that additional EBITDA added back in there for what I'm going to use there. And I'm going to get something else somewhere else in return for that. But if I'd only had my financials clean from the start, it wouldn't even be a point of negotiation. So I wouldn't have to make any concession later to offset to get all that profit to count for the bottom line. I see that mistake happening. What else do you see when you look at the sales side from a transactional or strategic standpoint? You see things that if the owner had done some things 1, 3, 5 years earlier, would have made a real difference at the point of sale.
So the things that I always fall back on is what is the history for the last 3 to 5 years about your sales, your gross margins, and your net operating income. So what's the history look like for the previous 3 to 5 years? And then what's the forecast based on your own business analysis? What's your forecast of what your business is going to look like in 3 or 4 years? So you create this hockey stick profile that says, my revenues have increased, but with all the investments that I've made and building my products and my services and my customer base, I'm expecting that I'm going to start going up 10%, 20%, 50% over the next 3 to 5 years. So that provides a projection for the potential buyer based on your own business analysis. And you can do that. You want to do that with your sales, with your gross margins, and with your net operating income, because that tells the buyer what the expectation is in the future. And then the story that is part of the story that you tell. So once you create that, then you build the story over the next year or two to validate the story well ahead of you putting the business on the market, right? So that's what creates these large multiples.
I love that. And when you talk about the story and the growth rate, an interesting coaching tip might be, there might be occasions when you're going to, I won't say play with the financial, but be strategic about when you book revenue or book an expense. There might be occasions where you might want to bring certain expenses sooner so that you reduce profit so that the next year profit is there. And you say, why would you ever do that? Or why would you ever want to push revenue to a future financial year? And the reasons are that if I have a story, people are pattern machines. Right. If I see a story that shows a company that's been growing at 15% year over year for the last 3, 4, 5 years, they project that it's going to grow at that same pace or better, I trust it. But if I see the growth went up 20% flat, went down 2%, up 20%, that second company is worth less than the company that had the steady, stable growth with that part, the hockey stick, so to speak, with that. So sometimes I might want to consider with the customer, hey, maybe there have been occasions you might want to discount to give them an incentive to bring the revenue into this year. Or, hey, great, we'll do that, but we'll get you the invoice in January versus the invoice in November. Bad from a cash flow management standpoint, but it might make you 1, 2, 3 more multiples when you go to resell the company by reinforcing the story under which you're selling it under.
Yeah, so exactly. You want to create that story 2 or 3 years out. And I think that you want to be strategic in how you manage the business 2 or 3 years out to set yourself up for consistency. So the more consistent your sales grow, the more consistent your operating income grows, the higher the multiple you're going to get, because the buyer is going to know that they can take that consistency, overlay their strength of market or what have you onto that, and then duplicate that and take it even further or accelerate the curve. So thinking strategically and setting that story is so key to getting high multiples.
Yeah. And we're going to watch out for a couple other things on the financial side. For example, we're going to make sure that when we're doing that, we got the story in there, but we're also going to look at where's that revenue coming from? Where is that coming from? If there's a difference between how someone's going to value monthly recurring revenue, which is wonderful, versus one-off revenue from a strange product or a strange sale of a service offering. And so they're going to look at concentration risk. Any buyer worth her salt is going to look at, hey, David, 60% of your business is one customer. I'm going to ding the price because that's a risk if something goes on with that part. Also, I'm going to make sure that when I look at that, who has the relationship with the customer? Oftentimes those big customers, the owner, he or she is the one that has the best relationship with them. And so again, they're going to say, well, I won't ding you on the price, David, but I'm concerned with it, which means the earnout's going to be dependent on this customer and the other customer still buying the same amount from us. Otherwise, I'm going to pay you less. And you as the seller might have no control over that, but you might have a great relationship with, Jorgensen Inc. that's been buying from 20 years from you. But when you're gone, Jorgensen might get turned off. The new buyer, they might be jerks or they might be not as good. And so now what you are waiting to receive at that last 30% earnout at the 12-month mark or the 24-month mark, you're supposed to get another $4 million, but you end up getting $2 million because what happened was a shortcoming in revenue or profitability that was out of your control. So concentration risks are another one.
Yeah. And I would also offer, David, that some of these challenges, most of these challenges can be overcome if you think proactively 2 or 3 years out that you're going to want to sell your business at some point. So if you have a concentration risk with customers, if you have some risk associated with key staff, these are things that if you think 2 or 3 years out, you can understand what the risks are today, and you could proactively manage them out of the equation moving forward strategically.
So Rich, we're coming to the end of our time for this episode. However, what I want to do is I'm going to find a time to schedule for you and I. We're going to come back to the same subject, but I want to come into it from the deal point, from the contractual side and life post sale. I want to come at it from that perspective. So that will be part 2 of this episode. There's a lot of rich discussion we've had so far, but we need to go to that next part. We'll do it in the next episode. So Rich, thank you, but would you be willing to commit to create some time for you and I to get back to finish out this subject?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
For sure. You just let me know.
Well, to our audience, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Business Coach. As always, we hope you found at least one useful, concrete, actionable idea that you can take to make your business more valuable, more profitable, more durable, quite frankly, more enjoyable or scalable. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thanks very much, David.